How could a simple grammatical error change the course of a man's life forever? On June 23rd, 1991, in the serene, affluent town of Mougins in the French Riviera, the body of 65-year-old Ghislaine Marchal was discovered in the basement of her luxurious villa. She had been brutally murdered, with her body showing signs of a violent struggle. But what shocked everyone more than the crime itself were the words scrawled in her own blood on the basement door: Omar Emma Tour, a phrase that translates to Omar killed me. This message, written with a glaring grammatical error, an infinitive instead of the past participle, instantly turned suspicion onto Omar Raddad, Marshall's gardener, an immigrant from Morocco. The case quickly became a national sensation, not just because of the brutality of the murder, but due to the profound questions it raised about justice and discrimination in France. Omar Raddad's conviction, based heavily on this blood-written message, sparked intense debate. Was this a simple case of a gardener who killed his employer, or was there something more sinister at play? The case remains relevant today, as it continues to be a symbol of the potential miscarriages of justice and the deep-seated prejudices that can influence legal outcomes. The reopening of the case in recent years, thanks to new DNA evidence, underscores its ongoing significance and the enduring quest for truth and justice. The scene inside Ghislaine Marshall's basement was nothing short of horrific. The cellar, usually a mundane part of her luxurious villa, was now a grim tableau of violence. The entrance to the basement was barricaded from the inside, suggesting that Marshall had desperately tried to keep her attacker out, or perhaps to trap herself in with them. Her body lay on the cold floor, marked by numerous stab wounds, a clear indication of a violent struggle. Blood was everywhere, smeared across the walls and floor, a silent witness to the brutality she had endured. But what stood out, what seared this crime into the collective memory, were the words scrawled in her blood on the door: Omar Emma Tour. The phrase, which should have read Omar Emma Tue if grammatically correct, became the cornerstone of the case. The error, an infinitive instead of the past participle, was significant. It was puzzling that Ghislaine Marshall, a well-educated woman, would make such a mistake, especially in such dire circumstances. This discrepancy sparked immediate debate and suspicion: could someone else have written it? Was it an attempt to frame Omar Raddad? Despite these questions, the police swiftly honed in on Omar Raddad as their prime suspect. He was a Moroccan immigrant, Marshall's gardener, and he had no alibi for the time of the murder. Yet, the case against him was largely circumstantial. There were no eyewitnesses, no direct forensic evidence linking him to the crime. The blood-written message, with all its inconsistencies, was the linchpin of the prosecution's case. But this reliance on such a dubious piece of evidence only deepened the mystery and controversy surrounding the investigation. As the trial of Omar Raddad began, the prosecution's case hinged heavily on the blood-written message, Omar Emma Tour. This piece of evidence, despite its grammatical error, was presented as a direct accusation from the victim herself. The prosecution argued that Ghislaine Marshall, in her final moments, had managed to identify her attacker by name, leaving a clear indication for the investigators. However, beyond this message, the evidence against Omar was tenuous. There was no forensic evidence directly linking him to the crime, no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing that physically tied him to the scene of the murder. This glaring lack of concrete evidence raised significant doubts. Omar Raddad's defense focused on dismantling the prosecution's case, particularly the reliability of the blood-written message. Omar was illiterate in French, making it highly improbable that he could have written the message, let alone with such a glaring grammatical mistake. His defense team argued that the message could have been fabricated either by the real perpetrator to frame him or in some other way, given the inconsistencies in its form and content. They also highlighted the absence of any forensic evidence and questioned how such a crucial piece of evidence could be so flawed if it were truly written by the victim. Despite the defense's efforts, the court found Omar Raddad guilty of the murder of Ghislaine Marshall. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison. The verdict was met with immediate public outcry, particularly from those who believed that Omar was being punished not for the crime itself, but because he was an immigrant with limited means to defend himself. The case quickly became emblematic of perceived flaws in the French justice system, especially in how it treated minorities and those of lower socioeconomic status. The sentencing did not just close a case, it opened a national debate on justice, prejudice, and the integrity of legal proceedings in France. The trial of Omar Raddad quickly became a media sensation, capturing the attention of the French public like few cases before it. The dramatic elements of the case, the brutal murder of a wealthy widow, the mysterious blood-written message, and the trial of an immigrant gardener were irresistible to the press. French newspapers and television channels covered every detail, often sensationalizing the story and framing it as a classic whodunit. This relentless media coverage fueled public interest and debate, with many questioning whether justice had truly been served. The courtroom drama played out not just in the halls of justice, but also in the court of public opinion, where opinions were sharply divided. The controversy surrounding the case was intensified by claims of racial and social discrimination. Omar Raddad, as an immigrant from Morocco, was seen by many as a convenient scapegoat in a society where racial and social biases could influence legal outcomes. Critics argued that Raddad's conviction was less about the evidence and more about his background, a poor, uneducated immigrant who was easy to vilify. This perception was bolstered by the lack of concrete evidence against him and the heavy reliance on the flawed blood-written message. The case became a symbol of the broader issues of discrimination and inequality in the French legal system, sparking protests and calls for reform. The story of Omar Raddad didn't end with his conviction. It inspired a wave of books, films, and documentaries that kept the case alive in the public consciousness. One of the most notable adaptations was the 2011 film Omar Tour, which portrayed Raddad as a victim of a miscarriage of justice. The film, along with other cultural works, not only retold the story but also reignited public debate about the case and its implications. These adaptations have ensured that the case remains a topic of discussion in France, a cautionary tale of how justice can be swayed by factors beyond the evidence presented in court. In 2019, nearly 3 decades after the conviction of Omar Raddad, new DNA evidence emerged that cast significant doubt on the original verdict. A forensic analysis revealed the presence of fingerprints belonging to 4 unidentified individuals at the crime scene, none of which matched Omar Raddad. This discovery was critical because it directly challenged the foundation of the case against him, raising the possibility that others might have been involved in or responsible for the murder of Ghislaine Marshall. The presence of these unknown individuals' DNA in key areas of the crime scene where Omar's DNA was absent suggested that the investigation might have overlooked crucial leads, or worse, that evidence could have been misinterpreted or mishandled. In light of this new evidence, the case was reopened, reigniting the debate about Omar Raddad's guilt. The decision to reopen the investigation was not taken lightly, as it could pave the way for a retrial, a rare and significant event in the French legal system. A retrial would not only give Omar Raddad the opportunity to clear his name, but would also allow for a re-examination of the evidence with modern forensic techniques, potentially uncovering the truth about what really happened on that fateful day in 1991. The legal implications of reopening the case are profound. For Omar Raddad, a retrial offers a chance at redemption and the possibility of overturning a conviction that has haunted him for years. For the French legal system, it presents an opportunity to correct a potential miscarriage of justice, but it also raises difficult questions. How could such critical evidence have been overlooked or misinterpreted in the first place? What does this say about the fairness and integrity of the original investigation and trial? The case has become a litmus test for the French judiciary's ability to self correct and ensure that justice is not only done but seen to be done. The reopening of the case also highlights the importance of continual advancements in forensic science and the need for legal systems to adapt and respond to new evidence even long after a conviction has been secured. It underscores the ethical responsibility of the courts to consider new information that could exonerate the wrongly accused and to ensure that justice prevails no matter how much time has passed. Since his release from prison in 1998, Omar Raddad has lived a life marked by a continuous struggle to clear his name fully. Although his sentence was partially commuted by then French President Jacques Chirac, Omar has never been fully exonerated. The stain of his conviction remains, and the battle to overturn it has become a central focus of his life. Living quietly in France, Omar has maintained a low profile, avoiding the public spotlight as much as possible, while persistently seeking justice through legal avenues. His fight has been long and arduous, but the emergence of new DNA evidence and the reopening of the case have provided a glimmer of hope that the truth might finally come to light. Public perception of Omar Raddad has evolved significantly over the years. In the immediate aftermath of his trial and conviction, he was viewed by many as a guilty man, a murderer whose crime had been dramatically exposed by a blood-written message. However, as doubts about the fairness of his trial and the reliability of the evidence against him grew, public opinion began to shift. The portrayal of his case in books, films, and media reports has also contributed to a growing sense of sympathy towards him, particularly as the new evidence suggests that he may have been wrongfully convicted. Today, many in France see Omar not as a criminal, but as a victim of a flawed justice system, an immigrant who was unjustly targeted and whose life was irreparably damaged by a miscarriage of justice. The reopening of his case has only intensified these sentiments, making Omar Raddad a symbol of the ongoing struggle for truth and justice in the face of adversity. The case of Omar Raddad remains one of the most compelling and controversial in modern French history. From the moment Ghislaine Marshall's body was found, to the flawed investigation and trial, to the emergence of new evidence decades later, this story has continually raised profound questions about justice, bias, and the power of public opinion. How could a single blood-written message with its glaring grammatical error lead to the conviction of a man with no direct evidence against him? And now, with new DNA evidence suggesting that others may have been involved, we must ask, was justice truly served, or did racial and social prejudices lead to a grave miscarriage of justice? As we continue to follow this case, it forces us to reflect on the broader implications for our legal systems and society. What happens when the courts, driven by public pressure or bias, convict the wrong person? How do we correct such errors, and what does it say about the society that allowed them to happen in the first place? If this case has intrigued you, if it has made you question the justice system, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into true crime stories that challenge the way we think about justice, truth, and fairness.